Welcome to Certain Point of View, your first step into a much nerdier world. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com. Thanks. And now your hosts, Ben Milton and Addy Thomas.
Hey, Nerf Herders, I'm Addy Thomas.
And I am Ben Milton.
Thanks for joining us. Well, Ben, we've got that awesome new music. I'm so happy that we finally changed up the music.
Yeah, you know, it's been a long time coming. We've been wanting to do it for a while, and I, too, am very relieved that we finally able to do it. And we were able to do it because people have been helping us out on Patreon, and that gave us a little extra cash to kind of swing for the money that costs for the new music bed. So thank you so much to our patrons who have helped us out. If you want to be a patron and want to help support the show and see what other kind of neat and fun things that we can do, if you throw us a couple bucks to help support the show, head to our website at certainpov.com, click on the support link. You'll see both Patreon and then also donations and stuff that you can buy on the website there as well.
And also want to make sure to thank our voice for our new voice for the show, Angela Derrick, for voicing our intros and outros and all that kind of stuff too. So thanks for that. We've not only have we have the new imaging, the new voiceover and music you may have seen on the website. It looks brand new. We've got new graphics and everything thanks to our buddy Sean. We've got a whole lot of stuff that we just kind of wanted to we wanted to launch the show and get going with whatever we had, so we did that. But it's nice to have, all the music and graphics and everything look a whole lot more professional and a whole lot closer to what we wanted it to be as well. So we're really excited about all of that. But don't forget, you can check out Patreon and everything else. If you can share the podcast with fellow nerds, go to our website, certainpov.com. Today we're talking Green Lantern, which is a franchise that is very near and dear to my heart especially. I'm a diehard Green Lantern fan, but I don't get to say that very often because there isn't a whole lot of good there haven't been a whole lot of good adaptations of that.
No, once you get outside of the comic book, it's pretty dry. Other than the Green Lantern animated series. Other than that, it's been pretty awful.
And that was a great animated series, and sadly, that was really affected by the movie being such trash that it ended up sort of canceling it. Well, recently there's been some news. It's interesting because as we're going into the DC animated, not DC animated, but the DC Entertainment Universe. All the new movies. We've had Man of Steel. We've had Batman vs. Superman. We've had Suicide Squad. And as the plans have kind of emerged for Green Lantern, like when the big announcement happened for all the movies, like Green Lantern was there like really briefly at the end in 2020. And like as this first Justice League lineup has come across, we really haven't seen Green Lantern come out because there's a lack of confidence in that particular character. But Lantern is one of is up there with as one of the top 4 characters. You've got Batman, and then you got Superman, and then you got Wonder Woman. But Green Lantern is a huge part of DC and their universe. So it's been a rough going for Green Lantern fans. I think Green Lantern fans feel like they have more representation through the Big Bang Theory than they necessarily have through the actual character in TV and movies.
That's fair. It's absolutely fair because I feel like DC's kind of supplanted Lantern with Flash, that they've tried to make Flash sort of the fourth on the Holy Trinity of their universe. But they haven't really done a Flash movie. Now, when the Flash movie comes out, we'll have to see how audiences respond and whether or not they're super excited about having Flash on the big screen, or whether or not it's going to kind of put Lantern back in perspective of like, you know what? Green Lantern is a badass hero. Okay, and that's really kind of what I'm hoping to happen, because you have such a great mythology and such a great mythos behind the Lantern Corps and Oa and all that stuff. I mean, it's really, really cool. And you have so many different lanterns that make it really interesting. Now, I know that traditionally they go with either Hal Jordan or John Stewart as the Lantern in their mythology. But honestly, neither of those guys are my favorite. They're not my favorite. And I would not choose those two to make the cornerstone of my Green Lantern story. But that's what it sounds like maybe the new movie is going to do. I think we saw some. I think I saw a blurb this week. Was it David Goyer? Is he the guy who's doing the Lantern movie?
Yeah, they're saying that David Gore is going to write it, and they're talking about Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart, which is interesting because you mentioned that they tend to be the cornerstone. I mean, that obviously, we've only seen these characters outside of the comics with these two characters, really. Guy Gardner has had a little bit of time in the animated series, but
and
we
Kyle
haven't.
And Kyle Rayner did briefly too.
Did we have Kyle Rayner in the animated series?
Not in the animated series. They had him in. Was it Justice League or it was one of the cartoon shows?
No, we had Jon Stewart for the most part.
Yes, but Kyle Rayner does make an appearance in I forget which series. I can't remember which series, but I know he does make. It's only an episode or two, kind of a deal. So
I don't remember that in Justice League Unlimited. I remember Hal Jordan made a one episode appearance, but Jon Stewart was there for the bulk of it.
Yeah, for sure. And you're right. Those are the two that they traditionally go with. And they're the two most uninteresting lanterns of the Corps. Like, that's not the direction I'd go.
Well, I disagree with that, but Hal Jordan is pretty critical to the lore of the Green Lanterns. But obviously, if you're starting a new adaptation, that there's chances to reinvent it. So I don't necessarily feel like you have to be locked into it. Obviously, we just mentioned, Hal Jordan's the first, Jon Stewart was the second, Guy Gardner came in third, Kyle Rayner is the fourth. Since then they've also added Simon Boz, and they've also, we've had tons of Green Lanterns added since then. I'm trying to remember the new one. Is what's her name? I want to say Jessica Cruz. Jessica Cruz is the newest addition to the Green Lantern Corps. So we've had like multiple Earth Green Lanterns added to these series, but they're all very diverse ethnically, but also in terms of other parts of their background as well. And they also bring very distinct personalities and very distinct challenges to it. And like for me, Green Lantern doesn't need to necessarily be part of the DC universe to be interesting. The Green Lanterns could just exist as a franchise in and of themselves, because there's a lot that you can do with those characters. You don't necessarily need your Superman, your Batman, or any of the other cosmic characters, but you have them, so it's sometimes fun to play in the universe with them and against other characters as well. But with this movie, yes, it looks like Jon Stewart and Hal are the key characters that they're looking at.
Yeah, I don't like that at all.
I know you want to go Guy Gardner, but I feel that's just you being a troll, just because you love his haircut.
I do love his haircut, but I think he's a much more fascinating character too, because if you know Guy Gardner's history, he was also chosen at the same time as Hal Jordan to be the next Lantern, but he was in an accident and in a coma when the ring was needed to find a new Lantern, and so it chose Hal Jordan instead of Guy Gardner because Guy wasn't able to take the ring, and it was because of the accident and the coma that his personality is so wonky and he's such a dick. Like he's a head injury patient. So
yeah.
It's a much more interesting. Like you can still have Hal Jordan in your story, but I wouldn't make him the cornerstone. My problem with Hal Jordan is that he is just like most DC characters.
He's kind of a generic hero.
He's a generic hero. He's this flawless, perfect being at this one thing that he's supposed to do. He shows no fear. And he's just like pure willpower. And that's not interesting to me. You know me. I like to have my heroes flawed. I like to have my heroes complex. And so to me, Guy Gardner is a much more interesting hero. If it were me doing this movie, it would be Guy Gardner and Kyle Rayner. That would be the most interesting buddy cop combo that you could possibly put together, because they are complete opposites.
Well, I think you can do Jon Stewart and Guy Gardner. I think they're a good. I think they play off each other a whole lot more effectively than necessarily Kyle Rayner. Kyle Rayner, you have more of the artsy type. He's a little bit more, he comes off as a little bit more timid and reserved than
Uh-huh.
the others. Whereas, John Stewart, you have the guy who's the ex-marine but also an ex-architect. So there are a couple things like I
Because
like my
those
John.
two couldn't possibly be more opposite. I'm sorry. I know that that's really stereotypical, and I'm sure there's somebody in the armed forces that's angry with me right now. But really, an
Well, he was in the
architect.
Army Corps of Well, he's in like the Corps of Engineers and stuff like that. So like that.
Well, then he's not in the Marines. Like that's completely different.
Well, it depends on like which origin they've gone with. Like
Which is it? Is he a Marine or is he in the Army Corps of Engineers? I always
well,
heard
I'm
he was
not-
a Marine.
what?
I always heard he was a Marine.
It depends on like again. It depends on which version you've gone with him. Yeah, like I think originally they've made him an engineer or an architect first off. But then later on, but that's also what accounts for sort of his precision and everything. But it's not like we've never seen people in the military study to be other things.
Yeah. Okay.
You think that's too? You think that's too much?
I think it's a bit of a stretch to me. Like if you're just going, yeah, I don't get like Marine and architect. Like I don't put those two things together.
But you don't think it's possible to put those two together?
Of course, it's possible. We're talking about a guy wearing a magic ring that makes constructs with his mind. Of course, it's possible, but it seems unlikely to me.
All right. Well, I mean, I didn't think that was that unlikely. I mean, it's not like you've never seen people go into the military to study other disciplines.
How many Marines do you know?
Not many.
Okay, you go talk to a bunch of Marines and then tell me how likely it is that they're going to be architects.
Well, that's fair, but like the guy well, see, one thing that I like to think with Jon Stewart, and I don't think it's going to go this way, is when they cast him, they're probably going to go for a younger guy, But I like the idea of a Jon Stewart being a little bit more older, like maybe a little bit more past his prime. Not necessarily Danny Glover old. I know that they're talking about a Lethal Weapon vibe for this movie, but like.
Well, that only makes sense, right? Like if he's already been in the military and he's already an architect, like. That's he's got to be in his earliest. You could have that is mid-20s. Like you can't have him.
See, I would make him older than that.
Yeah, ideally, I would have him pushing 40, right?
Yeah, well, I would put him in his 40s, to be perfectly honest. I think that makes more sense for Jon Stewart. I think he's more interesting that way. If you go older,
But here's the problem. Though. What do you do with Hal Jordan? Since Hal Jordan is the first, if you put Jon Stewart in his 40s, that and how long has Hal been doing it then?
Well, by the same token, you don't necessarily it doesn't he doesn't have to be younger than Hal. The Ring could have just chosen him at a different time in his life. There's no necessity to saying there's no reason Hal couldn't be 35 and or he couldn't be he could be 30 and you could have Jon Stewart be 40. You could already have a little bit of a different age dynamic between the two of them. Because the Ring chooses people at different times for different reasons. It's not like the Ring chooses you at birth. It's not like a Jedi thing where it's like, well, we got to choose him before he learns, fear and attachment,
Right. Which actually would be a good idea.
Yeah.
Seems to me that would probably be a good idea. Okay, I guess. Yeah. All right. I'll allow it. I still don't think Hal's interesting enough to lead a story.
Yeah. Well, see, now I like the idea of Jon Stewart.
No matter who you pair him with.
Now, I think Jon Stewart should be the lead in the story, and Hal should just be the guy who's been around and is just a little bit more reckless. But we'll come back to sort of what we want out of this story. Let's kind of go back, kind of go through what we've already seen in this franchise. We obviously saw a less than good movie with the first Green Lantern with Ryan Reynolds, and enjoyed some of Deadpool at that franchise's expense as well. Looking back at that movie, how much do you remember of that movie? I know it's not a movie we like to remember.
I only watched it once.
Yeah.
And I didn't hate it. I know a lot of people really truly hated that movie. I didn't hate it. It was a flawed movie. Parallax was a really bad decision to go with right out of the gate.
Right.
There was a lot of problems with the movie, just like every DC movie. Like every DC movie just Like it's close. You're like, oh wow, there's groundwork here to be good, but no, you didn't get there. Like
Right.
they just screw it up along the way by either trying to do too much, and I feel like that's what happened in this movie. So they just tried to do too much, and they didn't really. Well, Ryan Reynolds, I read a quote from him saying like his biggest regret about that doing that movie is that there was no script when he took the movie.
Oh, really? I
Mm-hmm.
didn't realize that.
Yeah, he was. And they was like, well, what went wrong with Green Lantern? He was like, well, I took the role and there was no script. He was like, I should have insisted on seeing a script before I took that movie.
Yeah, there's been that's been an interesting that movie's had an interesting history because the character was expected to be in the George Miller adaptation of Justice League, which originally was supposed to come out around the time of Batman Begins, or shortly after it. Totally separate, Batman and everything. But then there was also going to be, at one point, they were going to play it up as a comedy with Jack Black starring as Hal Jordan.
Oh, can you imagine how fucked up that would have been?
See, we should all be grateful that we never got the Jack Black Green Lantern, know?
Really? I mean, that would have been awful. That would have been so bad. Like, as much as I love silly and fun and goofy, that Jack Black should never be in any kind of superhero movie. Period.
Right. Well, I mean, the interesting thing is this character has gone through sort of an identity crisis when it comes to the movies. They haven't been sure how to play it, and what we got, I think, with that Green Lantern movie, because I also didn't think it was the worst superhero movie I'd seen. There are plenty of bad ones. In fact, I think if it had come out 5 years before, it would have been a much more divisive movie. I don't think it would have been quite as hated. I think we had already gotten, like, that was post Dark Knight, so there were already and post Iron Man, so there have already been certain established expectations for what a superhero movie should be, and that was sort of retreading some of the ground that we saw with the Fantastic Four movies, the first two, and like it felt a little bit more like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man in some of the ways, with how campy it was in certain aspects.
Yep.
But also kind of how generic some of it was, and you can kind of even, like, it felt like they took pieces from different movies, like the campiness of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. They started some legit universe building, like they had Angela Bassett as Amanda Waller in that movie. Right. Like even Parallax looked like the way they treated Galactus in Fantastic Four, as just a cloud rather than as something that was that was truer to its identity. So it felt like it combined a lot of the things that had kind of gone wrong with past superhero movies, and just we had already gotten past a certain expectation for what a superhero movie should do. This felt like a little bit closer to what, like, the first X-Men movie was like. I don't know.
Yeah, but not as good as the first X-Men movie.
Right. But to be fair,
it had the same sort of campiness, the same sort of flaws, same sort of cheese to it. Yeah.
Right. Completely. Right. And that was fine for that X-Men movie when it came out at that point, with what other movies had been out, know?
Right.
So unfortunately, they hadn't really kind of learned from what else had been done out there. That movie did so poorly. I remember watching it. I remember going to see it in the theater. I was really excited, and it was just disappointing that it's not that they didn't necessarily get it, but they didn't know what set this character apart from others, and which is why they went that generic route. They went for a villain a little too ambitious in Parallax, rather than trying to keep it simple. Like they felt forced that they had to do someone big and bad, and I think this has always been a problem with a lot of superhero movies is going big right off the bat. But we can talk about some of that in a little bit, but I think, unfortunately, this movie was so like people just didn't understand the Lantern Corps. They couldn't understand the history well enough. They couldn't tell it They didn't tell it effectively enough. So people weren't really sure what a Green Lantern was, even though they had probably the best casting in a Sinestro that they could have, and it would have been cool, if they would have been able to continue with that Sinestro down the road. But they obviously weren't able to. That movie, of course, ended up really, really crushing the franchise because shortly afterwards we had an animated series coming from the same guy who brought us the Batman animated series and Justice League, Superman animated series, Bruce Timm. And this is a series that I always, a lot of people are always like talking up Young Justice and wanting that to come back. Green Lantern's the one I really want to come back. I think it's a much better series, but it was 3D animation. They really got to the core of who the characters were. They didn't pick the typical villains that you would pick for the Green Lanterns, but they really, really had some great character development. They explored the Red Lanterns. Came up with sort of an AI who had, identity issues. Ben, what do you remember from that animated series that you
I
really
remember
enjoyed?
loving it. I thought that was the best representation of Hal Jordan that we've had so far.
Yeah.
Cocky and smart and really good, but yet human. Like, I think like that's kind of my problem with the Hal Jordan that you usually see is like, it's like every Tom Cruise character ever is Hal Jordan. That's like, if I were to cast Hal Jordan, just throw Tom Cruise into it. It's the character he plays every single time of
There's a pilot.
the pilot who's the best at what he does, and just has to overcome this one little like unsure thing about, oh, am I really the best? And then, yep, you're the best. Like that's Hal Jordan's story to a T. Like, and that is Tom Cruise's character in every single movie. You just change the job that he's doing, and in this one, you give him a magic green ring that he controls with his mind, and he is Hal Jordan. But in the animated series, I really liked it because they did kind of humanize him, and they did have that character there. I guess, the thing is, like, you're able to tell that when you're telling a story and, half-hour chunks week to week to week to week to week, like, you have the ability to create characters. And the problem with Hal Jordan in a movie is that he is so one-dimensional and flat, it's not particularly interesting. And that's why I say I wouldn't use him for a movie, but in a TV show, great. He's great. He has great relationships with Carol Danvers. He's got, his frustrations with the little blue people. What are they called again? I can't remember.
Guardians.
The Guardians. And how he deals with them. He's got he's got his relationship with Sinestro.
Just so you know, Carol Ferris, not Danvers.
Oh,
Carol Danvers
is Miss Marvel. You can tell what a Marvel boy I am. Good grief, that's embarrassing. But his relationship with Kilowog, who's a fascinating character, and then this new character that they created, the AI. Her name was Aya.
Aya.
Yeah. She was great. She was really good. I thought the whole series was fantastic. I agree with you. I would love to see more of that series. I wish they would bring it back. I don't think they will, but I thought it was really good. If they want to make Green Lantern a serious part of the DC universe, movie universe, they really do need to kind of reintroduce Lantern that way, so that people have a way to get familiar with the character and understand what the core is and what they do, and not just throw it into the middle of a dense movie and try and explain it that way. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, even though it's kind of sad not getting to see Green Lantern right off the top with the new Justice League. Maybe he will. We don't know necessarily at this point if he does suddenly show up. But there is actually a bit of an advantage of that. If they kind of treat the Green Lantern core the same way that the Guardians of the Galaxy have been treated in the Marvel universe. The fact that they're very separate and you're getting to develop them in their own way. There are a lot of similarities between those two franchises. I think there's a lot of ways you can still differentiate them so it doesn't feel like it's a knockoff of the Guardians of the Galaxy. So but the cool thing is, and this was something that was explored very well in the animated series, is you started to have the different power core and you started to have the different color spectrum and introducing that aspect. They started off with the Red Lanterns, with the Rage Lanterns, which isn't a typical move to go with. The yellow core is always the thing to go for. Like Sinestro is who you make a beeline for as the villain. And Sinestro is a great villain. He's one of my absolute favorite villains. I think he's very much the Magneto of the DC universe, a guy with very good intentions but incredibly flawed methods, and who's willing to go and sacrifice people on his own side if need to for his cause. So very much a zealot, very ruthless, very precise, and very calculating. Obviously, it doesn't help that he has a name that is a villain's name.
This is right on the nose, right?
Right. I mean, I know it's his last name still, but seriously, like that's a little bit unfortunate.
Bad guy.
Right. But it was kind of cool. Again, in the tragedy, sort of the tragedy that is the animated series, we got to see one episode with Sinestro, but as a good guy, and that was so refreshing. Like it's awesome to see that, and that's one of the things that I think that's hurt the Green Lantern franchise is the rush to make him a villain. That was a part of the problem with that first Green Lantern movie. Is you already knew the guy was kind of bad. He looks like a bad guy. He's already not wanting to work well with our hero or the Guardians, and you're not really sure why. But like they already push him, like in the after credits scene of that movie, like you see him use the yellow, energy and you create, a yellow ring and everything, which is the beginning of him starting the Sinestro Corps, the Yellow Corps, based in the power of fear instead of will. So you already start having that push there. I think that's one thing that's very important in this franchise. I don't think anybody is going to be bold enough to do this. Is to keep Sinestro a hero for a while. One thing I'd love to see out of this movie, and we might as well just go ahead and talk about what we want to see in these movies and what we think are special about these characters. You have such a wide range of villains and characters to choose from. You have DC's cosmic villains, the Anti-Monitor. You have Mongol, Darkseid. I'd keep them for Justice League and Superman and all of that. But you have a lot of cosmic threats. You have the other Lantern Corps to go with. I think, though, to really start off the franchise properly, and I'm excited by this little part of the announcement, is the Lethal Weapon part of the announcement, because I've always thought this franchise needs to start off as a buddy cop, not necessarily comedy, but a buddy cop story. And I mean I love buddy cop movies, so it makes sense, but these are cops. They're intergalactic cops at the end. At least that's the way they start out.
Right. I agree. I think that's the right way to go. How about this for an idea? If you're going to do the intergalactic buddy cop and we want to keep Sinestro a Green Lantern for a while, why don't you just make Sinestro one of the buddy cops?
Well, see, I think actually what would be kind of cool is for each Green Lantern movie you pick a different Earth Lantern as the main character. Like you start off with John Stewart. Hal is already there. He's kind of the cocky guy you don't like. He is not the partner. I would actually like him to not be the featured partner. I'd actually like a John Stewart and maybe a Kilowog, maybe another alien lantern. But you really start building out the core and the way the core is working. Rather than two humans interacting, you have that. So like maybe Sinestro is kind of like, your angry lieutenant, who is giving you your assignments, and wants you to stay within the rules. He's the guy who calls them into the office after and goes over all the collateral damage that's happened. As a part of some assignment that's gone wrong. That's more Sinestro's role. Hal is sort of there as the shining star that everybody loves, that you're kind of compared to and you have to live up to. So I'd actually like to see Hal as sort of a character on the periphery of the series, but really let you go with like John Stewart and let's just pick, I don't know, well, maybe not for this movie, but I was gonna say Badge, the squirrel, or
that's too close to Rocket. That is too.
I know it is, but maybe not later on. You get to, maybe Badge is just somewhere in the background. You've got Kilowog. Kilowog, I think, would be a great counter for Guy Gardner, but John Stewart, you need to have someone who's a little bit more, a little bit more free thinking. But you have a chance for alien vistas. You shouldn't be dealing so much with Earth with this series. It's about expanding the galaxy, not about keeping it small. And I think that was another problem with that Green Lantern movie. It was like the threat was right on Earth, rather than saying you have this large sector that you're patrolling. There's any variety of threats you could go with. And I actually like the idea of a much smaller story, not even picking a big bad of any sort. I don't know if I would pick a big bad just make it something a little bit more. Maybe you're trying to stop organized crime on a particular planet. The reason I would like to go with that is because then you can start showing the dysfunctionality of the Green Lantern Corps and the relationship with the Guardians. You can start seeing where the Green Lantern Corps is held back, and you can even show, like, in the rest of the universe, maybe that the Corps doesn't have a lot of respect because they don't really fix anything. You know, like they're there to enforce the law, but oftentimes it's done for people who are already in power, and often the little guy kind of gets crushed under the foot of the bureaucracy.
Yeah, but what you're describing though isn't a movie story. That is a TV show.
Well,
that's not going to work in a movie. You're talking about like like 6 movies, like.
Well, no. What I'm talking about, I think you could.
Green Lantern.
You don't think you could? Well, you don't think you could do a guy who has diplomatic immunity in the first movie? Like, it's just a random mob boss that you have to take down, but then the guys sort of decide to go off book. Sinestro's kind of behind it, but doesn't want to officially be for it.
The problem with comparing it to Lethal Weapon is that Riggs didn't have a magic power ring. Yeah, he had a Beretta. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when you're talking about just fighting organized crime, like I get that, but like that's a pretty simple case. Like that's like you show up, you use a magic ring, you do what you need to do, boom, you're done. Like that movie's over in like 30 minutes. But you can have
the Guardians come in and stop it, because the Guardians are constantly interfering with what they can do. If this guy is protected by the Guardians, then maybe they have to do something off book to. You don't think so?
I don't think it makes a great movie now.
Well, see,
I think it's too foreign to what people aren't familiar enough with that universe. And you're talking about an alien world, an alien partner, alien boss, an alien oversight, an alien enemy, and people are going to get lost in all of that alien. But the reason that you base the lanterns on Earth is because it's familiar and people can get, like, you got to start on Earth. You have to start it on Earth and slowly build out on it. Yeah, because it's too foreign otherwise. Otherwise.
But isn't that what they would have said about Guardians of the Galaxy as well? Like, there's a lot of stuff that's really out there by the same token.
No, but because you're following. I don't know. I see what you're saying, but I don't think so. What you're describing is way more complicated than what the Guardians was.
So how do you show that? I think that was, again, this is one of the difficulties of what happened in the last movie, is they were trying to show the Guardians as ineffective. And they even showed that, like, Parallax was a creation of the Guardians in a sense, or another thing that they experimented with. Like, that's too far. But if you just show that the Guardians aren't necessarily, are sort of like just bureaucrats, that's all you need to really establish for the first go around, is that the Guardians aren't necessarily great guys. Yeah. Well, like, what do you think?
I don't know. It doesn't interest me. I'm not interested in that story personally.
But that's kind of a key part of any Lantern story, is showing that the Guardians are sort of ineffective. Because that's also a very key part in down the road turning Sinestro.
It's a key part in Sinestro. Yeah, it's a key part in Sinestro and Hal Jordan, which I do like Sinestro.
It's a key part in every Lantern character.
Listen, Sinestro's turn to the yellow ring is about as played out to me as Jean Grey's Phoenix story.
Okay.
It does. I don't need to see it. Don't do it. Stay away from it. Do something else. Do something more interesting. I know that is the canon. See, here's the problem that we have with comic book movies that I'm starting to get a little worn out on, is that we keep telling the same fucking stories over and over again. With, like, oh, let's tell the Dark Phoenix story again. Let's tell Old Man Logan. Let's tell Civil War. Let's tell Infinity. Let's tell a new story. How about that? Sure. Let's just tell a new story. Why do we have to keep retelling this, history that we've all read in the books? Like, that way, in my opinion, you run the risk of people not liking it, but you also then deflate all the comparisons of, like, well, it wasn't that way in the comic book. Okay, let's just get away from it. Let's do something new and come up with a new idea with these characters. Now, I mean, yes, the Guardians always need to be kind of the corrupt bureaucrats that kind of screw everything up. Like, that makes sense. Like, that tension between the Lanterns and the Guardians makes sense. And I agree, like, that's okay. I don't have a problem with that per se. I don't know that I'm that excited about it as a story for the very first Green Lantern movie. I mean, it can be part of it, but I think, like, if you're trying to reestablish Green Lantern as a major part of your universe, as a major player in this universe,
Okay.
you want to play it down the middle as much as possible to attract as many people as possible. And you want to do that, and that's what I think they need to do with this one. I don't think they need to, like, go too far outside into, like, crazy reaches of space. Look, the Lanterns each have a sector, and how big is that sector? Like, how big is a Green Lantern sector? Is it like our solar system?
It's more than that. It's bigger than that.
Okay, well, I mean, even still, like, I don't know. I don't have it on Earth. Have the first one on Earth. Establish it on Earth. Establish a Green Lantern, whether it's Hal Jordan, John Stewart, Kyle Rayner, whoever it is. Establish it on Earth. Establish who they are as a character. The most important thing that you can do for a Green Lantern story is establish the character and make people like the character. And
I
then
totally
from there,
agree.
you can
Establishing
put
the
them in
character.
any setting you want to. Once you establish the character, you can put them in any setting. And the easiest way to do that is to put them in a situation we can all relate to. Like, I can't relate to having a magic ring and fighting crime on Xanthar 4. Like, it doesn't make sense to me.
I know what you're saying, but I think that's part of the flaw that we faced in that first Green Lantern movie.
No, the flaw we faced in that first Green Lantern movie was parallax.
Parallax was a huge part of it.
It wasn't a problem that it was set on Earth. The problem was that they had, like, this nebulous, unclear, what the hell is this thing out of nowhere? Like, I mean, like, there was no plot. It wasn't the fact that it was on Earth didn't matter. You could have put that on any planet, and that still would have been a bad movie.
Yeah, that's true. I guess I see the chance for you to, build out your universe rather than keep it small.
You can build it out, but start small and build out. See, that's the difference between DC and Marvel. Like, Marvel started small. Like, they started with Iron Man, and they've built out from Iron Man. Like, DC's, like, jumping straight to Justice League, like, as fast as they possibly can, and they're going big as fast as they possibly can, and just throwing as much against the wall as they possibly can. Like, oh, we got Suicide Squad, Joker's in it, and everybody's in it, and and Batman versus Superman, Doomsday's in it too. Like, they're just throwing so much out there. Slow down, take your time. Build your universe. If this is really truly a universe build, then build your universe. Don't just explode. It's not you don't have to big bang this thing. Like,
right. Well, so let me
build it out.
So let me ask you this. So I suggested, like, mob protected by the Guardians and them having to go off book to do it. I still think you can do that in one movie easily. I think that's a story that's familiar enough with a concept that's familiar enough with people from just cop movies in general, but you're not crazy about that. What do you?
I'm okay with it.
Who's your villain for it?
Well, I don't know, because I'm not that familiar with all the Green Lantern villains, to be honest with you. That's an okay story, but if you're gonna, I don't have a problem with it, but I think you should do it on Earth. Do it like Men in Black. Do a Men in Black idea of, like, it's on Earth, but there's all this, like, oh my goodness, there's all this stuff going on in the universe. I had no idea, and expand your universe that way, but base it on Earth. If you want to go with that story and say, we're fighting, mob or gun running or weapon running or whatever, but it's getting routed through Earth, and it's our job to stop it from getting to wherever, blah 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 blah, then great. But just keep it on Earth is what I'm suggesting.
I disagree with keeping it on Earth, because I think Guardians of the Galaxy worked, even though you took it off, even though it was mostly off Earth.
And look how surprised everybody was by that, because it shouldn't. It usually doesn't. And if I'm DC right now, I wouldn't be taking a lot of risks.
Yeah, but do you like as long as you're? I think the key part, like as you mentioned, is making sure you have a solid character arc, a
Yeah, but
solid character
DC
story.
hasn't done that yet.
Right, but no. But again, we're talking about ideals. So the ideal would have also meant Man of Steel never was released. But
Yeah, I guess like if you're living in a magical world where you believe that DC can write a good script and create good characters, then yes, fine, you can take that risk. I'm not willing to I'm willing to suspend disbelief, but I can't suspend it that much.
I mean, but let me ask you this. I mean, it's not like we've never watched like Star Trek happen off Earth. It's not like we're working in a movie universe.
But 90% of the people are Earthlings.
Okay, that's true. That's true.
So you have lots of things to keep the show grounded. Of like, okay, I can handle this.
Right.
I get it. Okay. Like even in Star Wars works that way because 90% of the people are human.
Humans. Yeah.
So it's like, okay, like sure, I'm in this really world place and there's all this crazy stuff happening, but I can relate because it's humans. Like
right.
You when your main character is Kilowog and Badge, like it becomes like I'm not able to relate to this as much anymore because I don't think like a talking squirrel.
Well, first off, your main character is Jon Stewart or Guy Gardner, let's say. But like
because what you said was it was going to be Jon Stewart and probably Kilowog.
Paired up with like Kilowog. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but like okay, now you have one character that you really can identify with.
Yeah. That's true. All right.
It's a problem, and I desperately want to see Green Lantern be successful because it's one of the few characters, it's one of the few titles in DC that I actually really do like from what I've been exposed to. I used to collect Green Lantern, comic books. Like for me, that was a big deal because I just didn't really dig DC, and I still kind of don't because of a lot of the problems that we've already discussed in this podcast, but. So I've always said, if Marvel and DC could make a trade and trade the Fantastic Four straight up for the Green Lanterns, I would do that in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. Like that would be a win for Marvel. That's the one title that DC has that I think would make a great fit into the Marvel universe. But so I want to see it be successful. I like Green Lantern. Even when I used to watch Justice League, Super Friends, when I was in the 80s and as growing up. Like I loved Green Lantern. I thought that was like a really cool hero in the Justice League. So I want to see it be successful. So I think like you just have to be careful about how you use these characters and how you make them relatable. And I think you have to really take your time with it and slow down a little bit, and not just assume that people are going to be like, okay, it's a guy with a magic green ring and he can create it, whatever he can think of with his mind, and you can't fight yellow.
That's not true anymore. The yellow vulnerability is gone. All right.
Well, good, because that didn't ever make any sense.
Yeah, because you could just throw a banana at him. And
I was like, oh no!
School buses are his arch enemy.
Yeah, you can never save a kid in a school bus. It's tragic. So I think you just have to be careful about like restarting this story and taking your time with it and doing a good job of creating likable, relatable characters that people can, latch onto and be like, okay, I get that.
So let's kind of move past sort of the idea of, okay, so, good relatable characters. Like we know that's sort of a key part of any good movie.
Right.
What is it about this franchise though that kind of speaks to something a little bit bigger or, or a little like something a little bit more well, either is there a chance for commentary or is there something inherent in this franchise that does connect with people and that, maybe it hasn't, obviously so far it hasn't been explored in movies, but like, what is it about these characters that we can connect with?
Well, you're dealing with like will, love, fear. Like you're dealing with these mythological ideals of how people think and, or things that are important that make us human, right? Like that's what makes the Lantern Corps unique and interesting in my mind is that, you're dealing with these pure ideas of like, Hal Jordan's pure will is what makes him such a great Green Lantern,
Right.
and Sinestro's use of fear is what makes him such a great villain, and makes him so powerful. That purity of it, is what makes it really interesting and what makes that mythology really interesting. And especially in a time like now with, the Trump presidency, not to get political, but like there's this sweeping Munchausen syndrome of fear happening across the country of like people are like, I'm afraid of Trump presidency, and then there's another segment of the country who's not and very excited about it, and then there's like 70% of the country is just like, I give a shit. But there's these sense of fear and anger and rage, like all that, like you can tell really interesting stories that tie into the zeitgeist of what's happening in society using these motifs and using these stories and using these characters, because
Right.
you can tie into what's happening in the Middle East with anger, you can tie into what's happening here in America with fear, you can tie into anything with will,
Right.
and love, and all these great ideals that you can use to tell those stories. I think it's
Which
probably
is
the best.
a great point, because often a lot of these villains are creations of the Green Lantern Corps by mistakes that they've made in their past or other experiments by the Guardians and by different ways that they've tried to look at, setting the order of law, that they've created these different villains. You mentioned kind of the Middle East, like the idea of like, certain, like certain ways of creating order or nation building or something created, creates the Red Lanterns or something like that,
Right.
because of destruction that happens in their own
Blowback, yeah.
Yeah, so and of course you have the other lanterns as well that you can kind of explore and get to bigger stuff. I really like that idea. I think what's important with Green Lantern is, and I mentioned this really briefly, is that it's starting out as a buddy cop series, but expands into something much bigger. I think you have sort of the buddy cop beginning to it, but then it becomes a war. You end up having wars with these other corps. You end up having to take on threats that you're going to need the rest of the Justice League for as well, or you'll have to reinvent what the Green Lantern Corps is to do it. One of the things, and I'm a huge fan of the Jeff Johns run on the series. You have sort of this interesting dynamic with the Green Lantern Corps where they're not allowed to actually kill with the rings for most of it, but eventually at a certain point, the Guardians enable the ability to kill with the ring, and then that spirals into bigger problems, and then you have like sort of this creation of sort of like an honor guard of them, and then like you have like your they have like they're even a secret investigative arm, and then they even have their like internal affairs arm, and different characters kind of venturing into that, but eventually kind of expands into the Sinestro Corps war as Sinestro leaves the Corps and creates his own corps, the fear, yellow fear lanterns and such, and then you have all these other corps that are starting to come out of the woodwork. The Red Corps, you even have like Larfleeze, who's a Gollum-like character on his own with his one orange ring, off in some cave somewhere. And who's has enough strength for basically an entire corps. You eventually get into the Blue Corps and what they can provide with hope and not having power necessarily by themselves, but really being able to tap into greater power for the Green Lantern rings. One of my personal favorites is the Indigo Corps, which they're all like really, really terrible criminals, but they've been transformed by the power of compassion into other beings that aren't necessarily conscious of who they were, but they're able to do some great things. They're able to, both heal, but they're also very very capable warriors. They even have like teleportation powers and everything, but they speak a totally different language because they've been so transformed by this. It's very like it's a very interesting commentary on what compassion is and what it does to people, you know. And then, of course, you have these the Star Sapphires, love, which is not always as good as you would like it to be, because you also have the obsessive nature of love,
Right.
and what comes with that. You know, it's capable of great good, but it's also capable of some bad things too. So it's very like you were saying, it's very, because of these big mythological concepts, you have a chance to do some really cool things with it once you establish it. So it'd be interesting to see, you know, how you start off that establishment and how you kind of spin that out into something bigger and more cosmic as time goes on.
If they're smart, they'll roll it out in the Arrow universe and get people used to it a little bit. Like, just have Hal in that universe. You know, he doesn't have to have his own show, and he doesn't have to be a regular, but because it's going to be expensive to do a Green Lantern thing.
Oh, of course.
But it would be nice if you had some episodes with Hal to kind of introduce it, and then relaunch an animated series to tell the story as well. Like, you need as many outlets as possible to lay a groundwork of what you want your Green Lantern universes to look like, because it is pretty complicated and it can be pretty foreign, and you need to get people up to speed as quickly as possible so that when people sit down in an hour and a half movie, you're not having to do an hour of backstory to explain who the Guardians are and their relationship to the Corps.
Right.
Like,
absolutely.
that's what they like. If they were smart, that's really what they would be doing right now. Hopefully, we'll see something. Like, there's been like hints at Green Lantern in the Hour universe with Ferris Airlines and you know, talking about
the little Easter eggs here and there.
Yeah. So hopefully, you know, in next season maybe we'll see something, or in Flash or something like that, we'll see some sort of crossover. Actually, it would be good with Supergirl. Actually, would be an appropriate place to put it.
Yeah, definitely, since they deal with extraterrestrial threats anyway.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
Oh, man. Well, I hope the next go around for this franchise works out. At the very least, I want the animated series back in some form, even if it's a reboot.
Who would you cast? Who would you cast?
That's a great. Because that's been a big thing on a lot of people's minds. You know, like I said, I like the idea of an older John Stewart, someone who's lived a little bit more life. I would like, well, ideally, it's not going to happen, but I would actually go Dennis Haysbert. So it's definitely an old.
Wow, that is an old
John Stewart.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But more realistically, I actually think Mahershala Ali, the guy who played from Luke Cage, Cottonmouth, I think would be a great John Stewart.
Oh, yeah, baby. You know who I would cast? Idris Elba.
Yeah, also a little bit on the older side too.
But yeah, if you want to go a little
like
bit older, yeah, I like that. Because he's big. He's got the physique to say, oh yeah, this guy was in the military.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hal Jordan has been an interesting one that a lot of people have talked about. I know
that's a really hard one for me.
I've always thought Bradley Cooper would be the guy. Now, obviously, he's already Rocket Raccoon, but so I guess that's not going to happen. But I think he's got I think you need the ability to for some guy who has some comedic ability, but also the ability to have a little bit more of a dark, serious storyline. And I think Cooper is totally able to do that. You know, you've seen what he's able to do in terms of comedy with The Hangover. But you know that he's a good actor. You know he can handle some like real juicy character stuff. But outside of that, man, I don't know. I have a tough time with who he would have to be. I unfortunately think actually Tom Cruise might be his guy.
Tom Cruise is not a bad choice. I prefer my Hal Jordan to be a little bit older. Like the Hal Jordan that I always read growing up had like graying temples.
Yes, I also like that too. Nathan Fillion, I know, has always been the name out there for the most part, and I would stick with it 100%. Nathan Fillion is Hal Jordan to me. When I see Nathan Fillion, I see what's his face from what was it, Dr. Horrible Sing Along? I forgot the really annoying superhero he is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I also see Green
Yeah.
Lantern, Hal Jordan, along with Mal from Firefly.
I'm not against that casting.
Yeah.
I like that casting. I'm gonna throw a name out, and you're gonna laugh at me, but I actually think it would work really, really well.
It's your guy, right?
Clive Owen.
See,
Clive
the thing is,
Owen as an older Hal Jordan.
you
think
kind of
works
overuse
really-
him. That's the
I
problem.
know I do because he's such a great actor. He can do so many things. But I really think that that's a good casting choice for an
See, I
older
can't
Hal
see him
Jordan.
wisecracking though. Like I
Oh,
can see.
Did you not see Shoot 'Em Up?
Okay, that's not the kind of wisecracking that Hal does though.
Okay.
Like he's got to be able to hold his own with he's really good friends with the Flash. I don't see that Clive Owen friends with the Flash, you know.
I can see that. I can see
Yeah.
that. It works for me. Like
He
especially
pulls-
as like an older, kind of grizzled, kind of badass,
Yeah.
ideal of what a Lantern should be, and you just kind of like see him out there. Like I don't know that I would want him like palling around with the Flash, but like in
Right.
your idea of like, well, he's just this guy on the periphery, and you see him. Like I think like he's got the look and he has the acting chops to pull that off for sure.
That's true. That's true. If purely based on serious roles, yes. Yeah, I can see that. The comedy of the lightheartedness that Hal is also capable of, I don't see Clive Owen able to handle that.
I think you're wrong.
He's got great one-liners, but they're not necessarily lighthearted one-liners. It's like what was the eating your carrots line or whatever.
Yeah, I don't remember all the lines in that movie. I need to go back and watch that movie.
I'm surprised you don't rewatch that regularly.
I don't rewatch anything regularly. There's so much new stuff coming out. I don't
That's
have
true.
time to go back and watch stuff.
That
Who
is
would you
true.
cast as Guy Gardner? Because that's where I would put Nathan Fillion.
No. You gotta have someone who's more annoying for.
Oh, I find Nathan Fillion extremely annoying.
Which you still haven't watched Firefly all the way through, right?
Nope, because I found him really annoying.
I'm so disappointed with you. I don't understand that one.
And or your choice for Hal Jordan, I think, would be a good fit there. With who did you say? What's his name?
My original Bradley Cooper
Yeah, because he's cocky.
for Guy Gardner.
Yeah,
He's got to really play up the asshole, which I mean he
Silver
did it in
Linings
the Silver
Playbook?
Linings playbook
Oh.
exactly.
yeah. I mean, like he practically played that role. That's practically Guy Gardner.
Oh, that's an interesting one. Yeah, I'm a little bit unsure of that.
How about
one.
this? Who's the guy who played Stifler? Sean.
Oh, please don't bring him back into movies. I know who you're talking about, but I don't need to see him as a Green Lantern.
He'd make a pretty good. He could make a pretty good Guy Gardner, though.
Do you think you can take him seriously though when you need to?
But does anybody take Guy Gardner seriously?
I guess. Well, to be
wears
fair,
a vest. He wears a vest with big white, wide lapels.
Okay, well,
outlined
see-
in white,
What's really important with this though,
and a big white belt.
well, yeah, no, that's true. He is very. His style choices are interesting.
He's unique.
Yeah. Would you go with bowl cut or mohawk?
I'd go with Mohawk.
Okay. Oh wow, this is the first time you've said that.
In the
You've almost always said bowl
in,
cut.
in the movie, you gotta go with the Mohawk. I love the bowl cut. I think the bowl cut just adds to his.
For some reason, like I can't tear away John Cena as my image of Guy Gardner.
Really?
Just the look, just physically.
He's a big dude.
Yeah.
He's a big dude.
He's from a family of Baltimore cops. Is the other thing with Guy Gardner.
Yeah, that could work.
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know. He's a tough one to cast. Him and Hal, I think, are the toughest to cast.
Yeah, like I wonder if are there any other like ex wrestlers or current wrestlers who are acting like that you could think of that
Besides
could potentially?
Batista, Dave Batista, The Rock,
Yeah, well, yeah.
Cena, the guy who is Kane has done some movies, but that would not work at all.
Yeah, maybe that's the
Stone
wrong
Cold Steve
direction.
Austin. Well, what about like some UFC wrestler or fighters?
Yeah, because they might be a little less on the steroid look and more on
Yeah, the problem with that though is like once you start you get The Rock every like blue moon, and then you get Hulk Hogan movies too. Like
That's true.
you gotta be careful about just casting people based on their look. Like,
Right.
I would rather take an actor and take like 6 months to a year and bulk him up to get physically look like the part, like they did
Very true.
with Bane, than just take a wrestler or a fighter who can't act. And
I could actually see like Joel Edgerton.
Okay.
I wonder if he could play an asshole. Like usually he's a little bit more soft spoken and quiet in his roles. But I can't imagine Guy Gardner is that tough to play. I don't know. See we're going into new territory with Guy Gardner as a featured Green Lantern, to be perfectly honest.
What about Diedrich Bader?
Well, he has voiced him.
Yeah.
He has voiced him in Batman the Brave and the Bold, and he was a regular, and he is awesome. Diedrich Bader's voice is perfect for Guy Gardner.
Yeah.
He's sort of got that a little bit, like super cocky, but like not really smart kind of guy.
Yeah.
So, but he's also too old for the role.
Yes, a little bit, yeah. And he's got dark hair and not blonde hair. But I mean, you can put...
Well, you can change that. People
Yeah.
change that all the time.
Yeah,
So,
that's not that big a deal.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's also the other territory that we haven't gone into, and those are the two newest Lanterns. Simon Baz, who's the Muslim guy who also like carries a gun with him in case he runs out of power.
Smart. The very first smart Green Lantern.
Right.
Because those damn rings run out of energy all the time. My only problem with Simon Baz is that he looks like a luchador.
Really?
Yeah. I really don't like the mask. I really don't like that mask.
Yeah, I like the mask. I like it. I like his
weird.
look. Well, but then we also have Jessica Cruz, who like has anxiety around people. And is like until like becoming a Green Lantern was pretty much like would just stay at home closed in. So like that there's another interesting dynamic there for an actual character. Mm-hmm. I like that. I think is like just with the dichotomy of what you have to do and having no fear. I think that's sort of an interesting choice for a character.
Overcome that, yeah.
Yeah. So I like it's funny because we're talking about it like Hal Jordan because he's the best at what he does. The whole him overcoming fear doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but
right.
I think it absolutely works for all the other characters that you have, because with Jon Stewart, you have him trying to overcome past mistakes, whether that's as Marine, usually as a Marine and as a leader there. But also, even as a Green Lantern, he's made certain mistakes. Guy Gardner just overcoming his personality and terrible fashion choices.
Brain damage, damn it. Not okay to make fun of him.
Kyle Rayner, his personality. Maybe Kyle Rayner's character is a little closer to the Jessica Cruz type, where his personality is a little bit more timid. He's not necessarily the more like outspoken or bodacious type of Lantern that's out there.
No, but like because he's an artist, he should have the coolest fucking constructs ever. And
I think that's where that's what excites me about a Green Lantern movie is visually what you can do with these constructs to reflect each character.
Yeah.
Like I'm fine with Hal Jordan having baseball bats and airplanes and the
big mallets.
Yeah, big mallets. I mean, that's fine. That's
green fists.
He's very simple. Guy Gardner tends to go with sports themes. Like he loves his like throwing out a football or he also goes with the baseball pretty often. But he's definitely also a little bit more on the simplistic front. Whereas like Jon Stewart
like guns and
he does guns, but he also like he'll do like a giant drill, but like he'll have like working gears in each part of it. Like that's one of the things that like I was really enjoying when they talk about the difference between each one of them is just how like intricate and how precise his are, and then like Kyle Rayner's are just so creative and otherworldly, and like just it reflects him as an artist. And it'd be very fascinating to see what they can do with Simon Baz and Jessica Cruz. I do hope we can get to the point where it's not just about one Lantern, but but it's about the core, and it's about the different identities and the different challenges of these particular characters that you don't need to be attached to, like, well, this is your one lantern and this is your guy for the rest of this franchise.
Yes.
And I think that's a very important aspect to it, is the core's identity rather than the lantern's identity,
and how they and by using each one of these different lanterns to tell a different aspect of the core as a whole, and then lead up to maybe a Blackest Night, where then you're dealing with the core as a whole and how, all the problems with it, whatever.
Exactly.
I think that's totally doable.
And because you have the ability to use different lanterns, I would also hope that they're a little bit more willing to take risks with some of these characters. And by take risks, I mean like actually be willing to kill off a character rather than just say, well, they've got to stay alive. This is a big name and blah blah blah. I mean, you have the chance.
You are never happy until a hero dies.
Well, that's part of what also makes Hal Jordan fascinating, is the fact that he does die for a long time and that he becomes Parallax. Like, that's where, like, if they're bold enough to not just keep Hal around and actually let him get absorbed into Parallax and be Parallax for a while and actually, cause terror throughout the galaxy. See, the thing is, Parallax honestly is a great villain to go with. It just wasn't the way that they did it, and it wasn't the great villain to start off with. Because the fact that you're a villain who is your greatest fear, made like just that's come to life, you can make him different for every person who sees him. Like, each person should see Parallax, but see something completely different. Well, let us know what you think. Are there other stories, other lanterns that we're thinking of? Who should we start off with these Green Lanterns? Is a Lethal Weapon vibe the right way to go? What other villains could we go with? Let us know what you think. Just join the conversation. You can go to our website, certainpov.com, while you're there. Check out Patreon. You can share the podcast with other fellow nerds who would enjoy conversations like this. Just let us know what you think as part, what would make Green Lantern work? Or is Green Lantern just pretty much like, should we just call it quits on this particular character? Let us know. Go to our website, certainpov.com. And until next week, stay scruffy, my nerf herders.
We've got new episodes on Tuesdays. Go to certainpov.com for more.